Hello, my name is Cody. Welcome to the Unifying Field podcast, where we journey beyond the black and white into the vast spectrum of human experience. Here we explore the great question of why we are here, seeking wisdom in all traditions, in unity in our diversity. My mission is to bridge worlds, uniting hearts and minds through conversation, curiosity, and the shared wonder of existence. So take a deep breath in through your nose, open your mind, and join me as we step into the infinite together. One of the fun things about making these episodes is when I'm actively trying to improve myself and how I interact with the world, I am also taking you along for the ride. That makes my heart happy because it gives me the chance to help you on your own journey. And maybe my words of wisdom can help you make less of the mistakes that I did. This is another one of those actionable topics. If you haven't figured out by now, I'm definitely into the actionable. I know the last episode got pretty dark, and I just felt the need to shine light on that stuff. Today, we get back to talking about things that we can practice in our lives to begin being the change we wish to see in the world. And this starts with how we see the world and the stories we project onto it. Today's topic is about projection of stories. You'll be amazed at how powerful the human imagination can be. But first, we need some awareness. Physical life has this interesting way in which we interact with it. We don't really recognize this unless we become really self-aware. When we open our eyes, we don't simply look at the world. We process the information that is being provided to our five physical senses to define what we see. We process all of this information by running it through infinite programming models that were formed as we were raised by our parents or guardians, taught in religion and school, and infinite experiences and people one could face. Some experiences and people have minor impacts on us, and others have major impacts, obviously. And all of that gives shape to our stories. That is an oversimplification, of course. Everything that shaped us helps form the personality, otherwise known as the ego. And this ego, that is the person walking around in your body, perceives the information from the five senses in a way that's reflective of its past experiences with or related to similar phenomena, people, and so on. This is part of why I believe we come here to Earth, so we can experience the dualistic and polarity-based existence where we can know love because there is hate. We can feel happiness because there is sadness and pain, and so on. This ultimately creates the human experience that we as spirit become a part of. My personality is Cody, and he has been formed due to infinite experiences, environments, and genetic factors, just as your personality is unique because of your infinite factors. I used to think that the ego was a bad thing and we had to get rid of it. Think of ego death in relation to psychedelics, where you might experience ego dissolution and you lose touch with this physical reality. If you've ever done a heroic dose of mushrooms or similar, you know that that can be jarring and downright scary. I've experienced that myself and watched my ego fight and claw as it desperately tried to hang on to the physical world, only to be taken off to who knows where. Well, that's kind of the point of the ego. It helps us stay here in this physical body and stay safe, so long as the body is living. It's kind of a necessary evil, though I don't believe it is evil. It just gets in the way sometimes, especially when it comes to placing spiritual growth ahead of physical survival instincts. Sri Ramakrishna is said to have smoked a cigarette occasionally because there was nothing keeping him attached to his physical body. Ramakrishna was a fascinating character with tons of wisdom. He was a Hindu saint and devotee of the Hindu goddess Kali and would become absorbed by the Divine Mother. He always left his body in what is called Nirvikalpa Samadhi, which is a state of deep, thoughtless, meditative absorption in which the distinction between the self and the universe dissolves, and a person experiences a state of pure, blissful, and boundless consciousness. So by having a physical vice, he could stay in this physical form until it was time to permanently leave Earth. I think that was the dissolution of the ego, to the point that it was hanging on by a literal thread, which Ramakrishna would have had to create every so often, like by using an earthly grounding item like cigarettes. You might think of when you feel most connected to spirit, usually if you're fasting or eating an extremely clean, vegetarian or vegan type of diet, you're less bound to this body. Maybe you don't feel that per se, but you might be familiar with how eating a salad and fruit would be more energizing and you might feel lighter than, say, eating a heavy Thanksgiving meal with ham and turkey and all the fixings. The energizing effect is effectively lifting you up. And while that Thanksgiving meal is certainly delicious, it weighs you down and makes you really tired. You could look at that in terms of spiritual grounding too, which is a useful and necessary tool for people working with their psychic senses and witchcraft and magic. And when you need to ground yourself to the physical, eating stuff like meats and dark chocolate and wine will plant you firmly to the earth, along with touching the earth and visualizing roots growing out from you and deep into the ground. The ego also helps with survival, not just as an individual, but as a species. This is where we have the urge to mate. We have the urge to save up for ourselves treasures here on earth because the ego is of the earth. So you see, the ego is not something useless that must die. It serves a major purpose in our experience as human beings. And that is what it is. It is a human with feelings. With its nature, though, we have the possibility of becoming enslaved by it, which is a problem. I would say typically the ego is the one driving our car up until we begin a spiritual path. And really, it's going to be driving until we figure out how to regain control of the car. The key, of course, is to not let the ego be in the driver's seat. For you parents out there, once you accomplish getting the ego out of the driver's seat, I like to imagine the ego as a toddler sitting in their car seat in the back, trying to get your attention about some random thing while you're trying to focus on your favorite song. While it can be annoying at times, the ego's power eases. But if it is allowed to drive again, it may drive with reckless abandon like a 3-year-old toddler. But if we want to stay here on Earth for a bit, we need its help. And it helps if we come to understand its coping mechanisms and defense mechanisms. And thus, we have made it through the waters of the background and may enter the topic of today's episode, projection. I'm going to pick on my wife for a moment. She said, well, everyone knows what projection is. Yes, I agree. But there's a difference between knowing the definition of a term and being self-aware of your projection behavior. This takes serious reflection of past interactions and introspection during the creation of stories. And let's be honest, and being honest with ourselves. So let's begin. I want to start with an article that helped me better understand the idea of projection. It is from Psychology Today, and it's called Projection. It says, projection is the process of displacing one's feelings onto a different person, animal, or object. The term is most commonly used to describe defensive projection, attributing one's own unacceptable urges to another. For example, if someone continuously bullies and ridicules a peer about his insecurities, the bully might be projecting his own struggle with self-esteem onto the other person. The concept emerged from Sigmund Freud's work on defense mechanisms and was further refined by his daughter, Anna Freud, and other prominent figures in psychology. What is projection? Unconscious discomfort can lead people to attribute unacceptable feelings or impulses to someone else to avoid confronting them. Projection allows the difficult trait to be addressed without the individual fully recognizing it in themselves. Who developed the concept of projection? Freud first reported on projection in an 1895 letter in which he described a patient who tried to avoid confronting her feelings of shame by imagining that her neighbors were gossiping about her instead. Psychologists Carl Jung and Mary Louise von Franz later argued that projection is also used to protect against the fear of the unknown, sometimes to the projector's detriment. This makes me think of how we might hesitate to do something we dream of because our mind created a story that says it would be a waste of time. Because if we did attempt to do this, we would fail and people would ridicule us. And we don't take a single step. We stay, or rather stagnate, in our comfort zones, not improving and getting to better situations. I have certainly fallen victim to this on many occasions. All right, back to the article. Within their framework, people project archetypal ideas onto things they don't understand as part of a natural response to the desire for a more predictable and clearly patterned world. More recent research has challenged Freud's hypothesis that people project to defend their egos. Projecting a threatening trait onto others may be a byproduct of the mechanism that defends the ego rather than a part of the defense itself. Trying to suppress a thought pushes it to the mental foreground. Psychologists have argued and turns it into a chronically accessible filter through which one views the world. Projection in everyday life. Projection can occur in a variety of contexts, from an isolated incident with a casual acquaintance to a regular pattern in a romantic relationship. But learning to recognize and respond to projection can help people understand and navigate social conflict. How can you tell if you're projecting? When your fears or insecurities are provoked, it's natural to occasionally begin projecting. If you think you might be projecting, the first step is to step away from the conflict. Time away will allow your defensiveness to fade so that you can think about the situation rationally. Then you can, 1, describe the conflict in objective terms, 2, describe the actions that you took and the assumptions you made, and 3, describe the actions that the other person took and the assumptions they made in order. These questions can help you explore whether or why you may have been projecting. How can you tell if someone is projecting on you? If someone has an unusually strong reaction to something you say, or there doesn't seem to be a reasonable explanation for their reaction, they might be projecting their insecurities onto you. Taking a step back and determining that their response doesn't align with your actions may be a signal projection. I think they meant maybe a signal of projection or a sign. I find that it's easier to start learning what projection looks like when you see it in someone else. It's that age-old saying where you're blind when you're too close, especially if strong emotions are involved, which completely eliminate any possibility of rationality. But when you can witness it from someone else, without hopping aboard the emotions that arise, you can start to see it for what it is. I find this in my marriage occasionally, and when I get these moments, it fascinates me. Sometimes I fall into the emotions as I'm actively learning this stuff, but occasionally I get to observe it in the moment instead of reflecting on the situation after everyone cools down. Back to the article. We're almost done with it. A harmful consequence of continual projection is when the trait becomes incorporated into one's identity. For example, a father who never built a successful career might tell his son, "You won't amount to anything," or "Don't even bother trying." He is projecting his own insecurities onto his son, yet his son might internalize that message, believing that he will never be successful. Being a dad has been a real blessing in many ways. The obvious way is that I have two daughters whom I love very much. Another not too obvious way is that some days are really hard and force me to learn. I will never forget the first time my toddler said, "I love you." But almost as powerful was when she said she didn't like me. In fact, that happened today, right before I recorded this. And the first several times hurts because you take that to heart. I'm not gonna lie, it still hurts. But once you let go of the emotion, you stop projecting the idea that your kid doesn't actually like you. They may not even understand what they are doing. That's just one example, but I'm noticing more ways that I project onto my kids. A lot of it is because being a parent is stressful and frustrating at times, and things that might normally be small become really big when you're running on a few hours of sleep over multiple days. And I've started paying more attention to that. And I'm reflecting on whether my responses reflect how I was raised as a kid or if it's something else. Now, I certainly don't want to project limitations onto them from my past failures. I want to enable them to have way better lives than I did. And this is just applying awareness wherever I can to learn and grow, you know? And while we're here, let's talk about this for a second. You might think that because you're a parent, you don't have time for a spiritual practice. But I'm here to tell you that parenting is a spiritual practice. In fact, your entire life can become a spiritual practice if you learn to slow down and apply awareness to each moment. All right, let's continue with the article. Just a few more sentences. Although it's difficult to do so, individuals who experience this can try to remember that the critiques are about the other person and to be confident in who they are outside of that relationship. That last part is a struggle in itself, as people who struggle with self-esteem may struggle to not go into defense mode. Depending on the scenario, it's still not easy for me. And though my self esteem is better today, I think I struggled with that for a lot of my life. And I'm not sure if that was religious programming or what the origination was. So now that we have a good foundation to stand on, let's take it further, returning back to the ego for a bit. As the ego, your person experiences the world and it develops beliefs and defense mechanisms based on its many experiences. For example, if you are hurt by someone and you maintain a trauma from it, the mind has created these defense mechanisms to enable you to be safe and avoid people who want to hurt you. In some ways, this is great. It is doing its job at keeping you safe. We should never be too trusting, and your ego is designed for self preservation. Always use caution and trust your intuition or your gut feelings. After all, it is a dangerous world. But if the defense mechanism that was created due to the trauma rules your world, you may struggle to socialize because that mechanism is telling you everyone is trying to hurt you, when that's probably not the truth. So then you become isolated and struggle because of that, because you won't let anyone get close to you since you are certain they only want to hurt you. And that's no good. That would be an example of trauma projection. In that case, you're projecting the traits of the person who hurt you onto everyone, regardless of their intentions toward you. The ego creates stories that tell us that that person resembles the person who hurt me, and this new person has become that old monster in your mind. It's a mirror of your trauma. We're walking around in an environment full of mirrors. And we are carrying around this bag full of rocks, ready to shatter the monsters we see in the mirror. But the mirrors are actually only reflections of what we hold within. They are illusions, stories that the ego forms to keep us from experiencing more traumas. All right. Traumas are going to be the hardest things to work through. So let's walk before we can run. Whatever we hold within, we project without. This is another one of those areas where I'm actively learning to incorporate growth into my daily life. They say you teach best what you most need to learn. So let's learn together. If we focus on the smaller things first, we can build confidence and become masters of the small things and build up to the seemingly impossible task of overcoming our traumas. Now, I'm going to help you understand projection by reflecting on some of my personal experiences of projection. At work, I've had times where I get really frustrated with department managers who do not seem to be good at their jobs. They're extremely inefficient and do things that unnecessarily multiply our workflow. This makes it seem like myself and my team are not good at our jobs, even though we are. And really, it's just annoying. So, for a long time, I began hating these department managers because all they want to do is make our lives harder on us than it already is. But is that the truth? Do they suck at their jobs? Maybe. Probably. Do they hate us and try to make our lives harder for no reason? While it certainly is possible, probably not. I can't hop into their mind and learn the truth about what they hold within. It's probably more likely that they are still learning their jobs and we have to deal with the mistakes and inefficiencies that come with learning. This is projection, and I'm creating a story and building characters. In my mind, I'm creating these storylines with these evil tyrants who want to ruin our day. And that story is an illusion I've created for myself to view my workday through. This seems to be a regular story my ego creates on a daily basis. The DMV. Oh boy. Nobody likes to go to the DMV. Until recently, I'd never interacted with someone at the DMV that was friendly. All DMV workers seem to be mean for some reason. There's this meme which goes like, I'm sorry, but I can't register your boat for you without the Declaration of Independence. It sounds absurd, but it's the truth. They always seem to require the most random and ridiculous things that they don't tell you about until you are there, which changes day to day in order to get your vehicle registered. I always thought, why do these people work there if they hate their job and people so much? But that is just the story I've created. Have I asked them this question? No. It's projection. Perhaps they've dealt with assholes all day, and I'd be the same way if people were being mean to me all day. But the last several times I've gone, it's actually been relatively pleasant. So I can't really complain anymore. And the more aware I become, the less I will project that onto them. I've also learned that a smile and being polite and kind goes a long way. Of course, being able to do things online without going in person makes it way better. Traffic. I've talked about my commute to work many times on this show. Tractors going 20 miles per hour on the highway, holding everyone up, people cutting you off. There are infinite examples I can come up with when it comes to driving. In the case of the tractors, there are many farms along my commute, and that may be the only way they can get their job done. I don't know what is in their mind. I don't know their true intention of being on the road. I can create that story and make my day worse if I want to. I can build frustration and hatred for someone I've never met and will likely never see again. That sounds productive. If someone cuts me off, perhaps it's because they wanted to be mean, but it's also possible and more likely that they succumb to their imperfect human selves and made the mistake of not looking before pulling onto the highway. Guess what? I'm not perfect either. I make mistakes all the time. And if I create storylines and project that onto them, it doesn't do any of us any good. In fact, projecting stories onto people only hurts us and can lead to road rage. In my own relationship experience, projection often comes through misunderstandings. A lot of fights have started due to texts that meant one thing and were taken another way. That is why I'm not a fan of texting today. It's hard to create the full context of a message within the confines of a few words. I think relationships are definitely a great place to find projection, especially early on in relationships, but even in more mature relationships as well. Perhaps you just started dating someone and you're super excited about this new and exciting person and you can't wait to see them again. But then they postponed seeing you. Something came up. A younger me might have created a story about how they were avoiding me because they didn't like me. Maybe they thought I was ugly. Well, you know what? They are ugly too, and I don't like them either. They're history to me. And then they text you and want to schedule another date. And you're like, oh, baby, that sounds great. I can't wait to see you. Whereas 5 minutes ago, you had this elaborate story going on about how much you both hated each other. Insecurity projections certainly shine in this department. The more you become aware of your stories, it becomes pretty funny and entertaining witnessing the drama unfold. We kind of also have to be willing to take ourselves less seriously. Our pets. Believe it or not, this is another area where we might project. And these aren't examples that I searched for on the internet. All this stuff is me reflecting on my everyday life and my past. One of my dogs likes to get in the trash when I'm at work. Shout out to Ruby and Loki. I remember that Ruby's previous owner was a truck driver and would be gone for many days. And my brother and my sister-in-law would feed her when she came over looking for food. This makes me think that she's dealing with an insecurity in her mind about the length of time I would be gone and the availability of food, even though I feed her every day. And she's been here for a couple of years now. I could get mad at her, but if the trash was full of things that might smell good to her, then I should have taken the trash out before I left. And if I get mad because I created this story that she is trying to make my already long day harder by making me clean up trash scattered everywhere, that doesn't do either of us any good. It just makes our day worse, and I go to bed frustrated. If they had an accident inside on the floor, which has happened a couple of times recently, they are asked to hold their bladders for a long time, and accidents happen. You might say, well, you should have held it. Well, you didn't have to spend 11 hours gone for work, which made them hold their bladders for that long either. And work has been making us stay an extra hour, so now they have to hold their bladders for 12 hours. And while you don't encourage any of that type of behavior, you might become a little bit more understanding. It's a simple shift in perspective as we go easier on the world and beings we interact with. I ran into another projection example at work, where this time it is the company. Actually, I've been noticing this projection for a while, but now I'm hyper aware looking for this kind of stuff. Where I work is a very physical place. Injuries have been extremely common lately, but they have been harping on everyone to report every little thing, no matter how small. And a lot of the accidents that have been occurring are really silly. One was someone took their hot food out of the microwave on break and burnt themselves. Another employee hit their funny bone, and their forearm went numb for a few minutes. Minor things that don't seem like injuries worth reporting. Literally, just give it 5 minutes and you'll be back to normal. And so we were told that they are going to require everyone to stretch in this designated location after each break, which I'm assuming will be monitored by cameras to make sure everyone is stretching after a break. It is also Christmas time and the workload is way higher. That means people are working, we'll say 30% harder during their shift, given the season we're in. Now, on top of that, they've been requiring everyone to stay an hour longer. So not only are people working 30% harder in an already very physically taxing job, they're now sleeping 1 hour less per night. That may not be the case for everyone, but I can imagine there are a lot of people like myself that don't shift their sleep hours if you work longer. You simply sleep 1 hour less and still have to get everything done for your day. Taking care of your family, chores, other jobs, and so on. The employees are more tired and not able to recoup from the day prior, and with that exhaustion, it becomes harder for people to focus and reaction times are slowed. Common sense, right? And so, while it is everybody's responsibility to look out for themselves and be safe, the company is pushing blame for increased injuries onto the employees, despite them being the reason for increased exhaustion and less time at home to rest. It's a simple risk assessment situation. If the company wants to move more products without increasing the workers to help with this increased workload, which increases strain on the employees and equipment, you also risk more employee injuries and more mechanical breakdowns of equipment that may not be designed to handle this. Increased risk equals increased possible reward, but also increased possible downsides. If you accept this new risk, you accept the potential downsides as well. Easy peasy. Seems like they saw dollar signs and closed their ears to the latter. And so now they are very confused as to why there are a lot more injuries. I do want to note that this was not about adding the stretching area. Stretching is fantastic. More stretching is more better. Go bananas. Heck, let's do a full on 1 hour yoga session after each break. I would love that. The real problem I was focusing on was the confusion about where to direct the blame for increased injuries. And yes, as you may have guessed, I am projecting stories onto them as well. And with that, I want to hop back into the article from earlier to read the examples they provided. How does projection affect romantic relationships? A common source of projection in romantic relationships emerges when unconscious feelings toward a parent are projected onto the person's partner. If the partner then identifies with and expresses the feelings projected onto them, projective identification is at play. Signs of projective identification in a relationship include having the same fight over and over again, feeling upset with your partner but not knowing why, and confusion about your reaction or your partner's reaction to a situation. Couples can overcome projective identification by recognizing it, slowing down in conflicts, checking to make sure that they understand each other correctly, and considering couples therapy if needed. How do narcissists use projection? Narcissistic people often resort to projection to protect their self image, complaining about how someone else is so showy or always needs attention is one example of how a narcissist might project. They may also blame others for things that have gone wrong rather than taking responsibility themselves. As the narcissist projects more shame and criticism onto another person, that individual's self doubt often grows, leading to a self reinforcing cycle. How do you respond to projection? Setting boundaries can help you respond to projection. Responding with clear statements such as, I disagree or I don't see it that way, can deflect the projection and may prompt the person to reflect or take responsibility. It can also prevent you from internalizing unfair criticism or blame. But if the person continues to project and seems unable to move forward, it may be necessary to remove yourself from the conversation. I hope these examples were helpful in helping you understand where you may be projecting in your own life. I found that real world examples help me understand this more than simply a definition. Then I took the examples I was able to relate to and started shining light on my everyday living, which helped me further understand and really gain some integration of wisdom. And that's what we're really after, wisdom. And we can view any moment of our lives and see some kind of projection. even the most mundane things. In fact, our entire lives are full of opportunities to grow. These projections are not obstacles, they are opportunities to advance to the next level of spiritual growth. It's probably close to impossible to remove all projections that we do, but we can dramatically change the world we live in by becoming aware and adjusting our stories. We're not trying to gaslight ourselves by saying life is great when it really isn't. But if our stories say our life is shit, and it really isn't, then that's no good either. So then, how do we become aware of our stories? We need to know what voice is talking. What voice is narrating your life? I want to tell you about a fascinating moment I had recently. It was also rather strange. I think it was more of a breakthrough than a run of the mill moment. I found myself in the state of awareness while I was working. It wasn't strange that I was aware. Meditating regularly helps you stay more aware overall. It was more that I was witnessing my inner dialogue with incredibly clear differentiation, or rather, the inner voice that is on a mission to better myself, and then my ego. It was strange because I was almost shifting between these three perspectives: self, ego, and awareness, as the drama was playing out. For context, the inner drama was over the idea of projection, which involved me trying to learn in order to present this episode. I had some downtime at work, and I was researching examples of projection to better understand my own. I began reflecting on how I project onto other people, and as I became aware of these things, it's like, all right, I will stop doing that and I'll pay closer attention to make sure I project as minimally as possible. And as such, if I stop projecting onto other people, my entire world becomes better as they are just phenomena happening and I can continue growing. Cool. Amidst the happiness of this, I switched to another voice. Weirdly, I'm all three independently, distinctly, and simultaneously. And this is not happening within meditation. It was happening while I was performing my duties at work. This was the fascinating thing about this brief period of time. And no, I am not schizophrenic. Anyways, another voice comes in that is very whiny and really brings some reluctance and pessimism about the situation. I could really feel the disgust and anger towards other people, even towards my previous voice that was trying to help me improve. And when it began making its case, I knew it was my ego, which I had never fully witnessed it defending itself from the state of awareness, rather than the usual embodiment of the ego. Although it began from the perspective of the ego, and then before it finished stating its case, I was already switching to awareness to listen further. This was really strange, and I sat with this for a little bit, trying to make sense of it. I hope this all makes sense, though I know it sounds kind of wild. In this moment, I'm both the ego and I'm also in the seat of awareness that is quietly observing, or rather, just the observer. And this is the ego's voice that came in. But if I fix my shit, that doesn't mean that everyone else will fix theirs. So what? Am I supposed to be everyone's punching bag? To get punched on one cheek and turn and give them the other? If they aren't going to stop, I shouldn't either. During this time, I felt anger towards other people who are going to continue projecting onto me. I would not be a punching bag for anyone. But then I went back to my seat of awareness and realized that that was my ego trying to keep control. My ego was trying to keep me safe as I was trying to, according to it, become a punching bag for everyone else's problems that they didn't want to deal with. And they would thus project them onto me, which of course didn't seem really fair to me. But then another voice began to talk, one of love and understanding. By not projecting onto others, you begin to show compassion for others who are on their own journey in this life. And you let them choose who they are without projecting an imaginary character onto them. If they want to project onto me, that is fine. I can be a target because I'm loosening the grip on the idea of myself, and as such, their projections have nothing to stick to. It's like Ram Dass's idea of becoming nobody. And with this loosened grip on the self, otherwise known as the ego, I can begin to love people without condition and provide the space for people to project and grow as well. And by responding in anger to projection, you don't provide space for the projector to become aware. In fact, you help them dig their claws into it further. And I think you even confirm their projections of you, which strengthens their problems. instead of giving them the space needed to release them. And with that voice of love, I made a breakthrough in differentiation between my inner voices and gaining a better understanding of the mystery of unconditional love. That doesn't mean I have mastered these things, but it provided great guidance for my future work. Now let us read through mystical eyes and ears the following words from Jesus in Matthew 5:38 through 45 as it relates to this. You have heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. Let that stir a little. If we aren't projecting onto others and we allow others to project onto us without becoming defensive, we have the opportunity to provide space for others to break through their own illusions instead of strengthening them. And yes, I know it is easier said than done. There's levels to all of this. So we start small. So then what are some methods and tools we can use to become aware of our projections? We first need to understand the idea of projection, which I think we've done a really good job at. And I hope, based on everything I've talked about, you can start to see where you are projecting in your own life and even how people around you project onto you. And with that understanding, we can run with it. But something may trip us up. That necessary evil I mentioned before, the ego. One way we can overcome this obstacle is, of course, to quiet the mind through something like meditation. A regular practice of meditation will help you be overall more conscious of the voices. And like in my experience, I was able to clearly distinguish the different voices, which doesn't happen too often. Usually it isn't as clear as that, and it takes some work to differentiate. But it is overall way easier to detach from ego when you maintain a regular meditation practice. And I believe that is what enabled my breakthrough. Otherwise, you may identify fully with the ego, and it'll be a bit more difficult, but maybe it's not impossible. The next thing we can do is slow down. Again, this will be easier through meditation because the ego may be reactive to defend itself. Anything that threatens it is bound to get a response from it. And I know mine has been that way in the past and even in the recent, although I am getting better at not listening to it so much. But if you can slow down and pause before you act on a situation, you can begin asking questions to your perception of what is happening. Some questions you may ask to reveal whether you're projecting are, number one, what actual evidence do I have for this belief or interpretation? Projection thrives on assumptions. What are you assuming? If the evidence is vague, emotional, imagined, based on past experiences, then the interpretation is likely a projection. Is this reaction bigger than the situation? If your emotional intensity outweighs what happened, your reaction is likely being fueled by something internal rather than the current moment. Number three, have I felt this way before in similar situations? If the feeling is a recurring pattern, it's probably a projection from a wound, fear, or past event rather than something caused by the present interaction. Am I attributing motives or thoughts to the other person? Anytime you find yourself thinking, they must think, they probably feel, they're trying to, you're entering projection territory. These are assumptions you are making about the situation. We cannot know another person's internal world without confirmation from them. Number five, if someone neutral watched this, would they see what I'm seeing? This breaks the trance of projection and forces you into objectivity. This is where the ability to switch perspectives to that of the observer, also known as awareness, can give you the space to see the situation for what it is. What part of myself have I disowned that this situation is touching? Projection often reveals a shadow piece, such as insecurities, desires, fear, anger, shame, and power, which hasn't been acknowledged yet. This is one of the most revealing questions you can ask. And I will tell you now, it is not comfortable examining yourself under the microscope. Spiritual growth is very uncomfortable, but the rewards are beautiful and well worth it. Number 7, am I reacting to this person or to a memory or figure from my past? Are you truly responding to the present person, or are you responding to someone from your history who they resemble in some way? This could be from someone who caused you trauma, or it could be a parent, and so on. Number 8, if you assume for a moment that this has nothing to do with them, what inside me is being activated? If the energy shifts inward when asking this, you know projection is at play. What about when someone else is projecting onto you? Number 1, are they describing me, or are they describing something about themselves? People accuse others of what they are secretly feeling or doing. Does what they're saying match my actual behavior? If not, you're likely dealing with their internal story, not your actions. This is why I think it's easier to recognize projection from someone else, because if what they're saying doesn't match reality, you have the chance to not feed into that, and you can try to explore where that projection is coming from, which of course exploration will lead to understanding. Number 3, is their reaction disproportionate to the situation? If the intensity is really high given the situation, it may be a projection. Number 4, are they refusing to consider other interpretations? Projection often comes with rigidity. Number 5, does their accusation match something they themselves struggle with? As I have discussed, people project their own fears, motives, and insecurities. I understand that this is a lot of questions to ask in the moment, which could require you to act quickly to come to a conclusion. And in the beginning, especially, those questions might help with contemplating past situations. So, a simple way of testing a situation real time is simply by asking, where is what I'm feeling coming from? If there's any hesitation or confusion, it may be projection. Clear things feel clear. Projection feels foggy or emotionally charged. Part of being human means we make mistakes, and we do project onto people and we reap the consequences. The same goes for when we react to other people's projections, in which case, after the fact, we may use journaling to put the past projection scenario into the spotlight so that we can test it with questions and hopefully do things better the next time. A lot of this type of working is simply shining light on our darkness, becoming aware of our shortcomings to overcome them. You don't know what is wrong until you know what's wrong. And without adding light, those things stay hidden in the shadows. And they can really do damage to our relationships if we don't shine light on them. Even more, they can literally make our lives a living hell or heaven on earth. Your choice. Now let's look at how life could be in a day where you're projecting compared to one where you aren't. I'm going to make up a random example for this. You wake up and you're not a morning person. Your kids wake you up too early. Now you're overly tired and have to go to work. Your kids are trying to ruin your day. Yes, I'm being a little dramatic in this. Just bear with me. You walk out to the driveway where your freshly washed and detailed car sits, only to find that a flock of geese had a shitting party on your spotless car. Of course, the universe hates you and has it out for you. You start driving to work and someone cuts you off, making you slam on your brakes. And then they are driving really slow despite being in such a hurry to get onto the road as to risk an accident with you. You envision this sadistic asshole in that car's driver's seat laughing hysterically as they make sure you are late to work. You get to work and your boss seemed to have made your life extra hard today. Your boss seems to be punishing you. Maybe they are jealous of you and want you to suffer. You make it to lunch. Now, on your lunch break, you pick up a food order. But once you get to work, you notice they didn't give you everything you asked for or paid for. They must be trying to steal your money. Ugh. You make it through work and return home, and your spouse wants you to help them with something. Can't you see that I'm exhausted? You know, I've been working my butt off all day. Why do you hate me so much? Of course, that was silly. That was meant to be silly and dramatic. But if we reflect on our day to day interactions, we may spot a lot of silliness like that. In reflection, your kids just happen to wake up early, and because they love you, they want you to be awake with them. The geese pooping on your car, well, that's just bad luck. As Forrest Gump would say, shit happens sometimes. The driver who pulls out in front of you likely made a mistake and didn't see you. Your boss may hate you, or they're just doing what their bosses are telling them to do. With your lunch order, maybe the person taking the order misheard you, or the person putting it together simply made a mistake. Your spouse loves you and wants to interact with you when you get home. You see, the story completely changed when we reflected on it. So, what about when we add awareness to our day? That same day, the kids wake you up early. The sleep would have been nice, but now I get to spend more time with my kids today. The bird poop, maybe the irony makes you laugh because you just washed your car, and of course that would happen. Life is funny like that sometimes. The person who pulled out in front of you, maybe something bigger than me is telling me to slow down today. Or maybe that person has a lot going on they're struggling with, and they just aren't focused, so they didn't mean to. Perhaps they could use well wishes or a prayer. The boss might just be doing their job to the best of their abilities. They may not be good at doing their job, and that unfortunately affects you. In the incomplete lunch order, people make mistakes. And my spouse loves me and wants to interact with me at home. I am lucky. Yes, I added some stories. But this time, instead of projecting onto them with these evil masterminds out to ruin your day, I promise I am very experienced in this department. I shifted them to something better than that is not gaslighting, but uplifting. Or even a story of neutrality would suffice for what we are going for. In which case, things simply happen that have no labels or stories attached to them. They neither added nor subtracted from your day. And all it takes is some awareness and reflection to shift our stories. We can even simplify the day further and say something like, the day occurred and people and phenomena happened. There were some highs and some lows, but not from projecting stories. And leave it at that. You're not enraged and fixated on your hate for anybody. You might simply be content. Do you see how literally you are the creator of your world by the stories you create and attach to every aspect of it? This is so huge. And this is not manifestation. This is simply becoming aware of the power of your imagination. You are way more powerful than you realize. I am way more powerful than I realize. Just with that shift in awareness. When we live through our stories, we build these wild inner worlds that can drag us deep into depression and anxiety. They keep us fixated on past experiences and can sabotage future relationships because we start assigning old wounds and old characters to new people. If we have no hope for the future because our mind tells us it's bleak or pointless, then of course we start living as if that's true. That's depression. But it's only true if we stay unaware of the stories we are creating. If we become fixated on future failures, things that are only possibilities, not facts, we can miss out on the joy of the present moment and the opportunities that could actually change those futures. Our stories can cripple us when we don't recognize the voices that narrate them. So ask yourself, whose voice are you listening to? Who's driving the car? Your ego or you? We live in a world full of mirrors, reflecting back exactly what we hold within. Those mirrors can show us monsters that keep us afraid, and we end up battling the entire world because it feels like everything is out to get us. But often, that enemy is an illusion we created ourselves. Those same mirrors can also reflect beauty, love, and peace, simply by bringing awareness to how the ego operates. The ego doesn't need to be destroyed, it needs to be understood. It exists to help us survive, but when it takes full control, it isolates us and convinces us we're alone in a hostile world. But when we understand it, we can take back the driver's seat, quiet the ego's voice, and actually live our lives fully. And when we do, we become a space where others can recognize their own projections and maybe even shatter their own house of mirrors. Thank you for joining me on this journey today with the Unifying Field podcast. We've touched on just a fraction of the vastness that connects us all. But remember, the exploration never ends. Keep asking questions, keep seeking answers, and stay curious. As we part ways, may you carry a little more wonder, a little more peace, and a renewed sense of connection with the world around you. Until next time, take a deep breath, question everything, and remember, the infinite is always within reach. Please like and subscribe and share with anyone you think may enjoy this type of content.